Good morning and welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering the importance of church on your Tuesday morning Rise and Shine, the importance of church. And this morning here, we're looking at the topic American Protestants duplicating the Catholic Church of the Dark Ages. American Protestants duplicating the Catholic Church of the Dark Ages. So I have an article and some thoughts to share with you here this morning. So, top of the morning to you here. Welcome to our live talk program. Hopefully, you had a blessed night rest. I'm ready to take on today. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, we thank you again for your love and the way you continue to lead us and guide us. We thank you for the truth of your word and the simplicity, dear Lord, of what you communicate to us. I pray, Lord, that as we learn from the past and we look to the prophecies of the future, that we might take heed and walk in the straight and narrow. Bless us, we pray, as we look at these things and as I share these things for Christ's sake. Amen. So we're looking here at this topic here, this idea here that I'm trying to capture in a topic. American Protestants duplicate the Catholic Church of the Dark Ages. So I have this article for some developments that are going on right now in our country when it comes on to what's happening with the church and our particular thing with the church. And this is what I want to share with you here, this idea here of this push more and more where churches are becoming national religion on their own, seem to be without provocation from any outside sources. So this is what's happening here. So before I read the article, I have two texts I want to share with you, and then I'm going to go into the article for this morning. American Protestants duplicating the Catholic Church for the Dark Ages. In Matthew chapter 22, verse 17 through 21. Matthew chapter 22, verse 17 through 21. It says, "Tell us therefore, what thinkest thou?" This is they speaking to Christ. "Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not?" So the idea of paying taxes, whether it be customs, tribute, whatever, to the secular state. But Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, "Why tempt ye me, ye hypocrites?" So there are a bunch of actors, they're not being straight with this question. It's a temptation, is a trick to mess Christ up. So hence he perceived their wickedness. And he says here, "Show me the tribute money." And they brought unto him a penny. And he said unto them, "Whose is this image and superscription?" They say unto him, "Caesar's." Then said he unto them, "Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." So render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, and unto God the things that are God's. Whatever belongs to Caesar, or whatever belongs to God, that's what you need to do. And leave it alone. It's a straightforward situation. But throughout history, that has been a problem. Because whenever the church starts losing its way, and it's not rendering to God the things that are God, somehow it becomes infatuated and mesmerized by trying to get involved with what Caesars ought to do and become preoccupied with the work of Caesar. Now, Caesar represents, as we know, the Roman authority, which was the ruling power at the time when Christ was alive. And Caesar, or the Roman authority, had a certain sphere of influence. They were put there by God, as Christ says later on to Herod. And also the similar idea can be conferred to Pilate, that they are not in that position. They're in that position because God put them in that position. They're not there just because they happen to be there. It is God's way of doing business or allowing things to go that way. So there's a work that they ought to do, and that work is to do the civil work. Things become tricky or unclear when Caesar started to do things that in one way or the other promoting religion or getting involved in religious dispute and stuff like that. That was supposed to be left to the religious leaders. So what happened in time of Christ is that the religious folk, the hypocrites here that was asking Christ the question about the money, they were not doing their jobs, and they were going to ask Caesar to do their job. And that's simply what it is. And so Christ says, just render to Caesar what is Caesar. Caesar is there to take care of the business of collecting tributes and tax, to take care of certain business. That's his job. Let him do that job. Your job is to preach the truth and to bless people. You do that job. But that job they had stopped doing. So they started becoming preoccupied with the work of Caesar, or the power that Caesar has. And today we have the same thing that's happening. As the church loses members, as the church loses power, the church now is going to Caesar and is saying to Caesar, you need to do these, take care of these things for us. And they want the power of Caesar because Caesar now need to enforce, or the secular government need to enforce, religious dogma and religious ideology and concepts. And this is where the problem is going to get worse, because this is developing more and more, where the church is trying to align itself and put people into power in the secular realm, in the governmental offices and position, in order to have the religious folk enforce what they can't enforce from the pulpit. So instead of the pastor preach and teach truth, and then the members respond to that truth and live their life according to the Bible, the pastors are trying to go to the state and saying to the state, we want to pass laws to force people by the power of the judiciary system and the police, to force people to follow rules that we preach. And this is what's happening, where we see now the American Protestant churches, as the numbers decline and as they get weaker, we see they're moving more and more in the political realm, and many people who are prominent pastors that are well known on TV or on the radio have taken out super PACs and various different organizations they've started so that they can function not as a pastor but as a politician or a political person who is trying to put people into power. So this is where we see many of the American pastors. So this is something that will be ongoing cover, because this is getting more prominent, as I'll soon read an article to you. So when we look at this, this is how things are shaping up, where the political leaders have no effect. They have no effect on the church members anymore. The sermons that they don't preach, because as you know, in many of these churches, they don't preach. All they talk about is grace and love and, just the sappy nonsense that they preach from week to week. It doesn't do anything for anybody. It doesn't move people in the path of righteousness. And so because that's the reality, and they're not being moved in a certain direction, the people are, as I say, they're out of control. And the way to bring them back into control is to try to force them. So if you're preaching and fornication and adultery is not being kept in check, the only way for you to basically stop the abortions that come after those fornication and adultery is to basically force the state to enforce abortion rules. And that's basically what the church has said. More and more as the people left the church and the people became more secular and unbelieving and believe more in evolution, then religion dropped from schools. So what you're going to do now, you're going to have to try to get control of the state and put people in office that will vote back religion back into the secular life of the people. And as you know, especially with the Catholic Church, many people left the church because of all the rapes that were being done by the Catholic priests. But you don't address that. What you say is, well, we don't care. We're just going to grab the state and force people to go to church. So this is the movement that's happening. I'm going to go to a second text here before I read my article. And it's in Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. Revelation 13, verse 11 says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So here, this is American Bible prophecy. America is described as being two horns. The horns represent a power. America has two horns in it. And when America speaks from its legislation and also from its pulpit, what comes out of his mouth is something that is against these two horns. Now, these two horns that are like lamb, they are represented by the two powers that are in America, the Protestantism and the Republicanism, the political and the religious. America has a very clear mandate where the church and state is separated from its Declaration of Independence and the various different Bill of Rights. So America as a country, very unique in the world in this very straightforward separation of church and state. The state does its thing and the church does its thing. What the religious leaders want to do is to make America as one horn, to make America into a unicorn. And now there will be a merging of the church and state. So when we look for the future, what we're looking at is this concept here where there is no separation, but the religious people will try to push to have the state become controlled by the religion. Now here I'm going to show you in the text why this is the way. Notice I didn't say that the state get controls of the church, but I say the church get controls of the state. The church start to control the state, and the result will be what we have, which is a church-state union, which anybody is not part of the churches that push this union will be persecuted. Look at this. It says here, and he exercised power of the first beast, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. So we know the first beast is the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church, the first beast of Revelation 13, the Catholic Church, unique about the Catholic Church was the ability to force or to try to enforce religious dogma using state power, and while being immoral. Just remember that. So it practiced and it prospered while being immoral. So no matter how immoral the church was with all the rapes of little boys and the abuse of women and stuff, the Catholic Church was still able to prosper and to use the state power to force people to do what it did never practiced, but what it was preaching. So if you look at this here, notice it says here that there's a future change that will happen in America, where America will no longer hold to the separation of republicanism and protestantism, but America will start to force or start to do things according to the Catholic Church. We see all of those developments happening. As I say, America has the biggest, largest, what you call spy system, similar to the time of the Catholic when they had the Jesuits. Infiltration and spying, massive. And many of the people who work in these spy agencies are religious folks, especially Mormons. Look at verse 13. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had a wound by the sword, and did live. So remember, the image of the beast is the power and the strength that the beast had. What made the Catholic Church so powerful? It was that it was able to enforce whatever dogma, whatever madness it preached. And that's ultimate power, not power based upon, as Paul says in Romans chapter 1, that he's not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God. The preaching was the power for Paul. The Catholic Church, the military might was the power. And so what I'm going to share with you next show that slowly American churches are becoming so enthralled with using the American government to be able to enforce its religion while they're being so immoral. It's the most immoral group of people in the world on no heart. So look at this here again, real quickly, just to show you the intertwine of religion, but it's a false religion. Notice in verse 15 it says, and he had power to give life to the image of the beast, which is persecution, and that the image of the beast should both speak, that means legislatively, and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed, that mean execution of that legislation. So there's a time coming when the American Protestant churches will have control over the state, and not only to be able to change the laws of the state, but also enforce by killing those who do not agree with it. That is what's coming. That's what the Catholic Church was in the Dark Ages, and that's what we see slowly but surely. The American Protestant leaders have become more and more in control of the destiny of the United States of America. And this is what's happening right in our very eyes. And he calls it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. That means a mark meaning, You have stamping your forehead would mean your frontal lobe, you go along. So there's some people who will say, I'll go along with the system. There are others who have a stamp in their hand. That means they are forced to go along. And it doesn't matter who the person is, rich or poor, free and bond. That means all will be forced in the system. And we can see the power of the system at play today in America. Notice this concept here that you could put a person in to push religious ideology that is very immoral. And the pastors who are pushing this, they themselves are very immoral. Notice here, verse 17, and that no man may buy or sell, save he have the mark and the name of the beast, or the number of his name. So we see here, again, what's coming is cut out from the financial system. We see that this is quite easy, easier to execute. It was done. As a matter of fact, I say this, that if you remember, Caesar did this in a time when there was no, what you call it, modernity. There was no type of technology. So sometimes people will say, well, the technology has to be there. I sometimes say this, but I always have to remind myself that there's no need for technology, because remember when Joseph and Mary had to go back to Bethlehem to go pay their taxes and for the census, there was no technology per se. So the method is a method that is just the ironclad power of the Caesars at the time, or Rome. Rome was iron monarchy. So you can execute just about anything in any time. Modernity is not needed. What modernity does, it makes it simpler and easier to execute, because it's easier to track people, with the modern day stuff like biometric scan or anything. But it is not necessary per se, because it's been done already by a republic, the Roman Republic. Verse 18, and it says, here is wisdom, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, which is the first beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 603 square 6, which where we get 666. So the number of the man, there's a man that particular they're fascinating with. Today we will say the most powerful man in the world would be, from a political point of view, would be the head of the American government. Whoever is the president of the government is always the most powerful man on earth. So that would be currently President Donald Trump. The most powerful religious leader would be classified as the Pope, at least in our current time. But now far behind him is the religious leaders that are in the United States that are part of these mega churches. They are very powerful. They wield a lot of power. They have a lot of audience, and they affect a lot of people's decision, including people in power. So this article I'm going to share with you now is going to speak real quickly here of one of these religious men. And he has a lot of power right now, because not only is he a pastor, that is a pastor of a major mega church in Dallas, Texas, but he is also, and his name is Robert Jeffries. He's also one of the evangelicals that advise the president, and he's in the evangelical council and advise the president. So he's really flexing his muscle since of late, because that's a lot of power. He's affecting politics and religion. So we see this concept here of what the Catholic Church was in the Dark Ages becoming more clearly stamped on the American psyche. So this article is taken from Christian Post, and it's entitled Robert Jeffries, America, a Christian Nation, secularist, humanist, atheist, infidel, pervert the Constitution. All right, so this is written by Michael Bosky, and it's written on Christian Post, and it's started here. First Baptist Church of Dallas Pastor Robert Jeffries has preached a sermon arguing that the United States of America was founded with the intention of being a Christian nation. All right, so I say this to you, when you have time, type in your browser, when you have some free time, type in your browser First Baptist Church, right, of Dallas, and type in your browser, your Google, Bing, wherever you search, and go over to the church website and find the service for last Sunday. That means 2 days ago, right? 3 days ago. And you go to that service and watch. You can watch the message, but watch if you have time. It's about 30 minutes. I think it is the preliminaries. Watch the preliminaries. And I say that to you up front, and hopefully I say that to you. I wanted to say that up front because I didn't want to miss it by the time I start getting into the article. But if you want to see something fascinating, and I think I'm going to go ahead and try to post the link. But you're going to get 3 options for last Sunday's service. You're going to get I guess probably the full service. You're going to get the sermon option, and you're going to get the preliminaries. Watch the preliminaries. The preliminaries, it's the preliminaries to me remind me of something that probably you see in like an Adolf Hitler video, but the difference is it's been in a church. This is nationalism, full tilt in a church. I've never seen it like that. Probably you have. I've just never seen nationalism being displayed in a church to that level. That was some serious flag waving. And when I say flag waving, it seemed like everybody in the church had an American flag. So anyhow, let me read the article, but just want to say that to you up front because it's important to see this for yourself. Reading it is going to give you just a partial idea of where the American churches are going. So First Baptist Church of Dallas, Pastor Robert Jeffress has preached a sermon arguing that the United States of America was founded with the intentions of being a Christian nation. At a sermon preached Sunday morning at the FBC Dallas, Jeffrey declares that America was founded as a Christian nation, with his large congregation cheering and applauding in response. America was founded predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly by Christians who wanted to build this foundation of Christian nation on the foundation of God's will, said Jeffress. Quote, furthermore, these men believe that the future success of our country depends upon our fidelity to the Christian beliefs. Our future success depends on our country being faithful to those eternal truths. Jeffrey divided his sermon into 3 categories. First, he focused on historical evidence, arguing that America was founded to be a Christian nation. Second, he analyzed when the nation began to digress from this Christian identity. And finally, he focused on the consequence of this departure. Jeffress believed that the United States began to detour from its Christian principles back in 1947, when the United States Supreme Court first used the phrase separation of church and state in a legal decision, specifically Everson versus Board of Education. All right, so keep that in mind. Jeffress then cited other Supreme Court decisions following Everson, which gradually removed various religious aspects from public school. We have allowed the secularists, the humanists, the atheists, the infidels to pervert our Constitution into something our founding fathers never intended, and it is time for America to stand up and say, enough is enough, Jeffress said. Quote, again from Jeffress, we are not going to allow this in our country anymore. It is time to put an end to this. And at that point, he received a standing ovation. Jeffress promoted this Christian nation sermon weeks in advance of Sunday, garnering controversy over his billboard advertising for the message. One critic, Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlins, was quoted in an opinion column published earlier this month by the Dallas Morning News, denouncing the billboard as divisive. This is not the Christ I follow, stated Mayor Rawlins. It is not the Dallas I wanted to be. I want to be, to say things that do not unite us but divide us. I never heard those words, that voice come out of Christ. Just the opposite. I was brought up to believe, to be proud of yours, but do not diminish mine. End of quote. 2 of the billboards were removed by Billboard company Onfront Media, apparently because the company disagreed with the message. Regarding the controversy, best-selling conservative Christian author Ron Dreher argued in a column published June 19th that Jeffrey's pending sermon was likely based on a historical shaky thesis, and said the overall Freedom Sunday event as a form of idolatry. Quote, you couldn't pay me to sit there and listen to Jeffries preach that poke in the eye patriotism on Sunday and partake in this church glorification of the war machine under the guise of a salute to the armed force, wrote Dreher. The sermon announcement was also mocked by Christian satire site The Babylon Bee under the headline Robert Jeffries announced new sermon series on idolatry to kick off the right after Freedom Sunday patriotic service. In an opinion column for the Christian Post published a few days before Jeffrey's sermon, Second Baptist Church Houston Associate Pastor Wallace Henley wrote that once upon a time America was a Christian nation in stricter sense, but now less so. My childhood was in the 1940s and 50s. Every Sunday morning, the public school I attended was not only began that day with Bible reading and prayer, but also with what is now a startling, even prosecutable question from our teacher. How many of you attended Sunday school yesterday? Raise your hand, wrote Henley. Fair or unfair, that illustrate the difference between the old America, which still had many injustices and problems, and the contemporary version with even more injustices and problems. End of article there. So fascinating little piece there. So with that, as I say, I wouldn't be able to, I guess if I probably should have played a little clip from the service, but I wouldn't even know where to begin. That service, if you have time, as I say, please go over to that church website if you have time, and if you want to see something fascinating, and watch the service, because the service basically is, as the other person described it, is like idolatry of the war machine, the American war machine. It's fascinating. So I guess I quickly describe the service here. So basically, the service is everything is just American flags, Constitution, pictures of American life in the past and how beautiful it was, and then just a lot of songs, like songs like "Oh Beautiful," "Oh Precious Sky." That song. I think it's written by I think it's this famous. I'm seeing his name is Blind, but just music like that. So a lot of famous American songs and very patriotic songs, the national anthem, all that stuff, and then they bring out different people from the different armed forces division, National Guard, Marines, so forth, and they play the different songs for each of those groups, and it's just unreal. And then people just waving American flag. The whole place is just filled with flag. So you go over there, you see that. I've never really seen that. This is the first I've ever seen that level of, military procession and American famous songs, and just everything patriotic and constitutional and everything done in a church. I've never seen it, so this is my first time. So if you've seen it before, then you'll be like, probably send me a video, and if you send me a video, I would appreciate seeing more of this, because this is brand new for me. I've never seen such a thing like that. Yeah, Ray Charles, thanks very much. And it's "Oh Beautiful for Spacious Skies." This is the song, thanks very much, that they did for it. So it's just like beautiful. I mean, full orchestra, full band, full house of flags. This is the type of stuff. So to me, I've never seen this level of patriotism, except for, because I know in America is known for not doing, for years they have stopped doing like military parades in like Washington D.C. and stuff like that. So this kind of thing that you saw in World War II with Adolf Hitler and the big celebration of nationalism, and we need to bring in nationalism. We need to bring in nationalism into the forefront and make America great and all that. So this is all that we think is coming up. So, the president, as a matter of fact, if I digress here a little bit, the president had said that he wanted one of these national parades to honor the armed forces. And some people are thinking that's so cheesy. But when you watch this video, you can say the church beat him to it. This church did an excellent job if it wasn't a church. You just want to stand up and salute the flag and all that good stuff. So that's it. So let's take 3 items here from this article. So first it says here, Jeffries believed that the United States began to detour from its Christian principles back in 1947, when the United States Supreme Court first used the phrase. So if you think about this, right, this is where the problem is, because as you know, Robert Jeffries here, he's one of the main Protestant advisor for the president, and he was one of the preacher. He and Pastor Hagee were the 2 Protestant preachers that preached at the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem last month. So he's prominent when it comes on to pushing the state of the United States to do things that are on the religious side, that are not they're not in the best interest of the state, they're in the best interest of church and dogma. So this is Jeffries here. So he says, if you notice this idea here, he says that in the 1947, America was more religious, and they started to do things to break up the religiosity of America. If you think about that's 1947, so mark that number there. Then the other thing the other gentleman was saying, the other pastor, later on in the articles, that his childhood was in the 1940s and 50s. See those numbers? In those childhood time, the teacher would ask the kids if they went to church yesterday. So the teacher would say, "Hey, you went to church yesterday," and most of you would be embarrassed. So tomorrow they will go to church, right? So this was the 40s and 50s. Now this is where the question has come about: Make America great again. When was it great, or when was it not great? Right? That's the question. When was America not great? Because America's always been great. It's the greatest nation on earth when it comes on to money and military might. So what exactly are they talking about? Because America's always been great, and is great today. So the person said my childhood was in the 40s and 50s. Jeffries says here that is in the 40s, late 40s, they started to change America. So if you imagine that late 40s America started to change with this idea here of separation of church and state in school. School is a secular education. You don't need to have that religious. So we need to take that out. Then imagine by the 50s, 60s, we start to have this type of noise about, civil rights for black people. And then desegregating of the same school again, coming in your 60s. So when you think about that, you think about how for the pastor at the end of the article, Jeffries, what was America for them and what was America for others are 2 different America. Because if you were living in a time of Jim Crow, especially somebody like Jeffries and the other pastors from down south, America was great. But if you were black and living in Jim Crow, the idea of what America is a different issue, or what the American public is, the majority of America, is 2 different things. So that's where the problem comes in. What are they talking about? Like what exactly is you saying America was a Christian nation, while if you look at the blacks in the time of slavery, when the Constitution was written, America was a place of terror. It was for the blacks, America were the terrorists, and the ISIS and Bin Laden and whatever Bin Laden used to be part of, I forget that now, the jihadists and all that. That was they were terrorizing these people, but their life was great because they were getting the benefit of the death and destruction and abuse of these people. Back in the time of Jeffries, when blacks were working for peanuts because they had no rights, and they were under the control of the masters. Yes, America was great, but yet was America true to its constitution? Was America treating the blacks, the American public treating the blacks as the Bible would have them treat them? Was America living up to its Christian ideals by the various different wars that were being fought, overturning of various different countries in Central America for the United Fruit Company and all that type of stuff? Was that really what American principle and Christian principles was all about? See, that's the question that is not being answered by people like Jeffers. But they're talking about this type of, you know, emotional thing that exists, that it depends on who you are. Notice again, I'm going to read from the article here. It says, we have allowed secularists, humanists, atheists, infidels to pervert our Constitution. It is something our founding fathers never intended, and it is time for America to stand up and say enough. And they should have added to that, is enough. Enough is enough. That's what Jeffers said. All right? Jeffers says that. Now, think about this now. Did the founding fathers intended that America Constitution should give civil rights to slaves? You know, as they say, should niggers get civil rights? You think the founding fathers thought that? So again, the separation of church and state. Because remember, by the time America accepted the church and state, this is something that kind of is as the separation of church and state and stuff like that, and the whole idea of all men are created equal, blah blah. They rebel against the system, the system that's coming from England and the Catholic. These are fresh ideals and ideas that I believe it was God that did this, because God was going to get what he was going to get. But these founding fathers, they might accept it, but to what level? Because remember, when many of these things were written by them, they themselves had slaves, or were having slaves as concubines, or just having slaves in their basement, having sex with and having half-caste kids. So to say that America was living up to Jesus's principles and God's principles back in the time of slavery or Jim Crow, when these men now in their 60s and 70s grew up and they have an idealistic view of what America is crazy, because this is just not the reality. It depends on who you are. Because remember, Americans want, if you go out to the average person and you say to go to an immigrant, they view America one way. You go to a black, they view America another way. You go to a white, they view America another way. Each group view America differently, because again, one group experience America one way, another group experience America the other way. If you go to somebody that's Adventist and you say, hey, read Revelation 13 verse 11, and I say, okay, you read it? Who speaks like the devil? I say, oh, in the future America speak like the devil. So I said, do you think for the black people, they would interpret that as America spoke like the devil in the time of slavery, in the time of Jim Crow, in the time of the war and drugs and locking up all these black men? They'll say, yeah, America always speak like the devil. But if you go to a white person and say, does America speak like the devil? They say, no, in the future, America never, ever spoke like the devil. It was never fork-tongued. It never made treaty with the Native Americans and then back out of those treaties and then abuse the Native Americans. It never did that. It always, whatever legislation was passed or whatever deal it made, America kept to the deal. And I guarantee you could bring me 100 whites, and probably 90-something% of them, or 80-something%, or whatever, I don't know what it is, would say, oh no, that never happened. America always speaks straight. Whatever rule it passed, it stick with the rule. America doesn't make free trade agreements and then back out of it. America doesn't, make agreement with, countries, foreign countries, and then back out of it. But if you look at the national history of America, you see that the Bible is so beautiful to write that yes, there's two powers in America, but they speak one way or they pass rules one way and then they renege on the rule and do the opposite. So here you go, Native Americans, we're going to put you over here. And Native American, okay, we love you. We will follow you, whatever you do. And then the next thing you know, they're being pillaged and killed. And you say, what happened here? And it's like, oh, that's how America does business. It's part of our national fabric. We make a deal with you and then we stab you in your head. So if you look at it, say we have allowed secularists, right? And humanists and atheists and infidel to pervert our Constitution. So the question is, who perverted the American Constitution? Was it secularists or humanists or atheists or infidel that pervert the Constitution? Because if you look at it, many of the times you go into the history and find out who was doing what. You find out there were religious people. Again, if you go to almost all conservative, you say, do you believe in torture? Do you believe in, and I'm like, yeah, okay, but do you believe in the inhumane treatment of prisoners? They say, oh no. Okay, so fork tongue. You don't talk straight. You just fulfill the Bible. The Bible is describing the character of the American people, and it says this is how they are. They speak one way, but they say one way, another way. Because this statement here is a fork tongue statement by Jeffries. He's saying it's the secularists that is perverting the Constitution. But if you go back in the American history, who did slavery? It was the more religious Bible Belt that did slavery. Who enforced and pushed Jim Crow law? It was the religious folks that did that. While they would tell people that all men are created equal, but they'll say, well, not black people. You see the problem there. So what Jeffries is saying doesn't mean that now an infidel or an atheist or a humanist or a secularist can pervert the Constitution, because that's the whole concept of a person who's perverted. But it's a problem when a person who is a secularist is doing the same thing that a conservative or a liberal Christian is doing. And then you pull back and say, well, probably it's not what the label of the person is, but it's probably what the character of the nation is. Because although he's blaming the secularists for perverting the Constitution, we could go through week after week, day after day, books after book, historical narratives after historical narrative from both conservative and liberals, and I can show you that a lot of the perverting of the U.S. Constitution has come right from the pulpit, right from the churches. And if you look at this is what someone like Jeffries is doing. Now, why is this so significant? Because Jeffries is one of the major advisor to the president of the United States, currently sitting, President Donald Trump. And so if you go to Jeffries and say, should you lock kids in cage? Oh, yeah. Should you take them away from the parents? Oh, yeah. Okay, how about this? Should these people get due process? They say, oh, no, only Americans get due process. So I said, wait a minute, are these God-given rights, Mr. Jeffries, according to the American Declaration of Independence, or are these human American citizens given these rights? And you say, oh no, that's God-given right. That's what the founding father says. So hence they're perverting the Constitution. They're perverting the Declaration of Independence. Because according to the Declaration of Independence, and if you know differently, I'd like to hear. But according to what I read from the Declaration of Independence, that the founding fathers wrote, they wrote that these rights cannot be taken away from a person because they're God-given right. So that's where Americans need to answer. Is the rights given by God, or is it given by a paperwork that say you're a citizen? Because they're saying is unless a person is a citizen, they have no right for due process. They can be tortured. They can be beaten. They can be treated like wild animals. They can be done things to them that you would even do to a dog, which is to take away their children from them. A bear, if you try to attack or take away or rob a cub from a mother bear, she get vicious. But yet Americans will say, oh no, that is only for, not all Americans now, I say, but notice I'm showing you how the conservatives are doing this. That they're saying, nope, those rights are not for those human beings. But you would give that right to a dog. You would say, no, that's wicked if you pull away the pup like that. The dog would go crazy. But yet you say, oh no, those Hondurans and El Salvadorans, they come in here illegal, and because they're breaking our law, our law, then there has to be a lynch. So they're going to start lynching them. I put nothing past these Christians. Because the conservatives have shown that is you could put them in the statement. So let's read the statement the way it's supposed to read. We have allowed conservative Christians, secularists, the humanists, the atheists, the infidel, to pervert our Constitution. That's what he should have said. And that would read straight. That would be a better statement. The founding fathers perverted the Constitution. You see the problem there? The founding fathers pervert the Constitution. And so if the founding fathers pervert the American Constitution, then that's where the problem becomes. Because how do you alter one side of your face or one side of your tongue say that all men are created equal? Then on the other side of your tongue, you say that, well, not this slave, and especially this hottie over here. She looks hot. I'm going to have her as my concubine. How do you say that? You could have a child with this person that's a half human or a quarter human or whatever human. And then the kids come out looking like you. And then how do you do that? It's forked up. It's hypocrisy at the greatest best. It's just high hypocrisy. Or you say, all men are created equal. And you say, how about this nation American? And they say, oh no. So I'm going to read two statements here from Elijah White. And I'm just going to tie in this idea here. Because often a person think it's the state is going to try and control the church. But on the contrary, if you notice, everything that's been done, it is the church that is pushing the president of the United States with a lot of this madness, because he knows that that's his base. If he wants to win election or stay in office, he has to have the church to back him. So here's Elijah White here from the book Great Controversy, page 588. It says, through the two great errors, the immortality of the soul and Sunday sacredness, Satan will bring the people under his deception. While the former lay hold of spiritualism, the latter create a bond of sympathy with Rome. The Protestants of the United States, notice very specifically, she's not talking about the whatever other group. She just say, look, it's these Baptists and Methodists, these evangelicals. The Protestants of the United States will be foremost in stretching their hands across the gulf to grasp the hand of spiritualism. They will reach over the abyss to clasp the hand with the Roman power, and under the influence of this threefold union, this country will follow in the steps of Rome in trampling on the rights of conscience, the rights to freely serve God according to the dictates of your conscience. So let's just quickly make a note here. So notice it says that the Protestants will reach over the abyss. The abyss is something that you can't reach over, so to speak, but they'll do it. In other words, Protestantism and spiritualism, that means the shamans, the witch doctors, all these people, the two are so far apart that in order to bridge that divide, it boggles the mind. And as I've covered here, and I'll cover in the future, and I'll use this statement again and show you the moves that the Protestant leaders are doing to connect the spiritualism, the dark mystery religions of Babylon, and bring them into the church. This is what's happening. This is one of the way they call it is spiritual formation. And this is happening in all Protestant denominations, including Seventh-Adventism. So when you look at this, these Protestant leaders are going over the abyss to bring mysticism. If you go to university like Andrews University or the Andrews University School before, they used to have a practice called Latino Divina. Instead of doing Wednesday night meeting, they would do spiritual formation for Wednesday night program. So these Protestant leaders in all the denominations, including Adventism, are going over and they're reaching across the abyss. Like, how can they, the two are so far apart. Because one is one bless you by obedience, this is Christianity, and one bless you in a disobedience. So what it is, they're basically saying they want God to come into their life, but they never want to follow the word. That's basically what it is. So notice here that it says, and they will reach over the abyss. So one reach over the, I have to follow what she's saying here. One reach over the gulf, and then one reach over the abyss. reach over the gulf, and then they'll reach over the abyss and grab Roman Catholicism. Roman Catholicism, although has some principles with American Protestantism, is so far apart in their practice. But somehow the Protestants of the United States, it says, it's the American evangelicals and so forth, and Baptists and Methodists and Adventists, they'll reach over and they grab the hand of Catholicism. Now, how is this possible? She says, well, part of it is that Sunday service, Sunday worship is one of the way they'll do it. But I believe more and more, as I'll show you in upcoming weeks and months, that they're doing this also because, notice, they are trying to all gain the same thing, to use the state to push their dogma. And this is where they're going to unite. This is on one point I believe they're going to unite, and I'll show you later why I say that. Notice again in the next paragraph there say, and as spiritualism more closely imitate the nominal Christianity of the day, it has greater power to deceive and ensnare. Satan himself is converted after the modern order of things. He will appear in the character of an angel of light. Through the agency of spiritualism, miracles will be wrought, the sick will be healed, and many undeniable wonders will be performed. And as the spirits will profess faith in the Bible and manifest respect for the institutions of the church, note that, for the institutions of the church, their work will be accepted as a manifestation of divine power. So, they're going to be like, you got to keep the church institution going. They're going to lift the church to high heaven. But what will happen? It is all done under Satan. So notice she says here that spiritualism is more closely imitated to nominal Christian of the day. If you have time, you can. I don't really. You don't have to do this, but I'm just saying I've done it. Where I've looked at, you look at like a seance, and people get in the spirit and jump in. And you look at the church worship service, and people get in the spirit and jump in. It's the same jumping like frogs. It's the same frog-like worship, and nothing different with it. It did both get in the spirit, and you can't tell the difference because one get in the spirit by Satan, and one get in the spirit by the Holy Spirit. They claim, and both are behaving the same way, and it's just noise and confusion and gibberish. Fascinating stuff. So the nominal churches, they just think about the main concept in the nominal church today. They get blessed without obedience, and this is why the Sabbath is going to be a big test, because the Sabbath says no. In order for you to get this blessing, because the Lord blessed the Sabbath and holiday, and it's a sign that He sanctify you, you have to keep the Sabbath holy. There's no question around it. But the concept in the Sunday churches today, and even many Christian churches, even many Adventist pastors today I hear preach, they want, just like a witch or a wizard, they want you to get a blessing, but no obedience, just grace. And so the two like, so that they go look at each other like, oh, I found my love. Oh, we won. Because we have the same ideology. I'm going to read one more reading here from the book Great Controversy, Final Warning. And so in the book Great Controversy, Final Warning, for the sake of time, I'll skip one paragraph. The paragraph where she quotes Revelation 18, verse 1, 2, and 4, which is the loud cry and the final message to be given to the world in symbol. And it says here, this scripture points forward to a time when the announcement of the fall of Babylon, as made by the second angel, Revelation 14, verse 8, is to be repeated with the additional mention of the corruptions which have been entering various organizations that constitute the religious world. Constitute Babylon, since the message was first given in the summer of 1844. So I pause there. So it says there's a time coming in the future where this stuff here that's going on in the Protestants of the United States is going to get so out of control that there's going to be a repeat, and the repeat will add the additional corruptions that are entered in the church. And today we can say we see this very clearly. Continue reading here. It says a terrible condition of the religious world is here described. With every rejection of truth, the mind of the people will become darker. their hearts more stubborn, until they are entrenched in an infidel hardihood. In defiance of the warning which God has given, they will continue to trample upon one of the precepts of the Decalogue, until they are led to persecute those who hold it sacred. Christ is set at naught in the contempt placed upon his word and his people, as the teachings of spiritualism are accepted by the churches. The restraint imposed upon the carnal heart is removed, and the profession of religion will become a cloak to conceal the basest iniquity. A belief in spiritual manifestations open the door to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, and thus the influence of evil angels will be felt in the churches. Fascinating. And thus, notice she ends by saying, and thus the influence of evil angels will be felt in the churches. So a lot of the corruptions and madness that we see going on, a lot of the failure and the torment and the suicide and the depression, is not because the Spirit of God is upon people, but because the devils are filling the people. And we see the result with, as she says here, the evil influence, the evil angels, the influence of the evil angels will be felt in the churches. And you go to the churches and you see the level of depression and suicide and just hopelessness and all that. You're like, wow, the sweet spirit of Jesus is not in this house. That's really what's going on. So when you think about that, you think about, as I say, the spiritualism and this idea here of how the church is now. And I'm saying all this because I watched the video. And I know you're probably getting the impact of it, but as I encourage you, go over to the First Baptist. Let me say it again for you, because I want to say it at the end before we close here. Go over to the First Baptist Church in Dallas. This is led out by Pastor Jeffries. And watch the opening, the preliminaries. It's half an hour. You don't have to watch every single minute. You can just scan through. You get the idea. And you'll be like, I was impressed. I was like, Revelation 17, I was startled. Because I've never seen that level of patriotism, even in a secular environment, much as a church. Because I know church was supposed to be worshiping of the Most High God, to uplift Jesus. So I've never really seen that on display in a church. Now, you probably have, but I'm not. So this is new for me. So when you look at this, and you should talk about the influence of the spirits upon the church. Now the church now is moving towards a national religion, where if you were in the church, you think it was a stump speech. As serious, if you go scan through a sermon, you find out it's more like a stump speech. He's reimagining what America was and is, and he's communicating to you and saying, this is what I want you to do, while he's celebrating the armed forces. So when you see that, I see the connection, because while he's saying, this is America, this is what America is about, and then he's there flag waving and cheering on the armed forces, that is, to me, is scary. Because remember, when the law is passed, according to Revelation, the law will be passed against God's commandment keeping people, and those who are true Protestants, it will be to kill them. Guess who is going to have to carry out the murder of God's people? It's the same armed forces and the judicial system and the police system. And so he's there celebrating that judicial system and celebrating that armed force system, while reimagining what America has always been. While he's the major, Jeffries here is the major contributor or advisor to the president on reshaping America according to the Christian, the evangelical view of what America is. You can see persecution is not far away. Persecution is getting closer in the United States, because these pastors are taking over the political system, and they're telling the armed forces that whatever we say that's true America, you need to enforce what we say. The brainwash is fully in, and this brainwash seems to be getting better. So as I say, watch it, and then you watch it. You tell me if I'm hyping, or you tell me if you can see the massive connection in my mind of getting these people ready for what the Bible said they will do. Let's pray. Our Father, we thank you again for your love towards us and the blessings of your word. We thank you for the insight and the foresight that you give to us. Our prayer, Lord, that as you guide us along, that we may not only make the moves that we need to make, but also warn those who are moving in the direction, dear Lord, to destroy this nation by their jingoism and all the things that they do. May you be with us, dear Father, and that we may always walk humble before you and be awake and alive and be looking out for what's happening. Bless us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. Well, thanks again for being with me here on Revival Form Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow again live, where we shall do the natural health. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.